when Martin brought up Luna, the poor scholarship girl, for the third time. I smiled and teased him. Do you think she likes you? His expression turned serious as he told me earnestly. Rose, don't joke about that. She's different from us. Never look down on someone who's working hard. I stuck out my tongue, feeling wronged. In the end, the two of them went to the best music conservatory in the country together, and I threw away my violin, went abroad, and switched to finance. The old rivalry between the White Moon and the passionate Rose had long since become a thing of the past. On the day I returned home, he invited me to dinner and placed a piece of fish on my plate. Out of habit, I pushed it aside. He paused, then fell silent for a long time. Chapter 1. When I returned home, I only briefly told my parents, but our family had always been close with Martin's, so when I saw Martin waiting outside the airport, I was not surprised. After several years apart, he was still beautiful. His features looked almost painted, his bearing elegant and reserved. Dressed in a dark trench coat, he walked toward me at an unhurried pace. Perhaps it was the aura of a music student, but the girls nearby were all secretly glancing at him. He came over with a smile and naturally took the suitcase from my hand. Rose, are you tired from the trip? The air conditioner is on in the car. Get in first. When he saw that I did not move, his eyes curved with amusement. Your dad asked me to pick you up. I hesitated for a moment, then got into the back seat. I asked casually, aren't you busy? It's Monday. The little princess is back. No matter how busy I am, how could I not come? His gaze was deep, unreadable. I looked away and waved my hand with a smile. Stop teasing me. That nickname is so childish. It feels weird now. He froze for a moment, but soon, he returned to normal. It's been so long since we last saw each other. Let's have dinner together. It was already very late. I hesitated briefly. Okay. Through the rearview mirror, Martin's gaze seemed to drift toward me every now and then. I pretended not to notice and lowered my head to reply to a message. Yeah, I just got off the plane. The other side replied quickly. Have some fun in a city first. Once I'm done with the work on my end, I'll be there next week. I was just about to type when he sent another message. I've been exhausted lately. I miss you a lot. The London financial markets had been rather turbulent recently, so he was probably busy with meetings. My heart softened. Seeing that I kept looking down, Martin said gently, don't keep staring at your phone in the car. You'll get dizzy. I paused. It was that familiar caring tone, gentle and indulgent. I could not help but look up at him. After several years apart, ever since the last time we had fallen out, we had not spoken for a long time. Yet Martin acted as if nothing had ever happened. When he smiled, his dimples were faint and shallow. I put down my phone. How are my parents? This time, the main reason I had returned was to see my family. 7 years had passed, and I was no longer as stubbornly fixated on old grudges as I used to be. Auntie was discharged a few days ago. The surgery went very smoothly. His tone was relaxed. Don't worry, I'm here, aren't I? I fell silent. His uncle was a famous doctor in a city, and he had given extra care this time. I smiled politely. Thank you. The moment those words left my mouth, Martin froze. In the past, I had always been shamelessly clingy with him. I made him buy milk tea for me, made him massage my hand when it got sore from playing the violin. I even pestered him into crouching down to tie my shoelaces, but I would only throw my arms around his neck with a grin and never say thank you. Every time, he would helplessly flick my forehead. You really don't stand on ceremony. You'll have to grow up eventually. At the red light, Martin rested his hand by the window. Then, as if casually, he asked, and you? How have you been all these years? Chapter 2. After I briefly unpacked my things, he took me to a nearby restaurant. It was a French restaurant I liked. The waiter brought over the steak. I answered absent-mindedly. Pretty good. London is nice. Martin smiled gently. I'll go visit when I have time. Halfway through his sentence, I watched as Martin swapped my red wine for a soft drink. I said helplessly, I mean, I'm already an adult. You don't have to do this. He stubbornly insisted. Girls should drink less alcohol. There was a professional music stage in the hall. A few girls who were performing there had stars in their eyes as they ran over to ask Martin for his autograph. After signing for them, he whispered something to them. The girls covered their mouths and secretly glanced at me, then ran back excitedly. Before long, a familiar melody began to play. My hand paused. It was a violin piece, a Norwegian dance, a rather complicated piece, carrying the fresh, crisp feeling of summer. Even now, I still remembered that summer when I was 17. Martin had sat beside me patiently, practicing with me again and again. In the candlelight, his smile was gentle. "Oh, right, Rose. When are you coming over to my house? My parents keep talking about you. And there's your favorite milfie." The calico cat at home had a litter of kittens last year too. As he spoke, he naturally placed a piece of salmon on my plate. I lowered my head and pushed it to the side. Martin's words came to a stop. He was silent for a long time, then rubbed his brow. Suddenly, he looked at me with a trace of exhaustion. "Rose, after all this time, do you still hate me?" My chopsticks stopped. Martin seemed genuinely unable to understand. "We grew up together. Was it just because I held her hand when we took our bow?" The violin music in the hall was still drifting on. Then it reached the next section. The melody changed in tone, stirring up memories from even further back. Memories that made me angry. Memories that made me sick. Across from me, Martin's voice gradually grew louder. His fingertips lightly tapped against his wine glass. "Just because of that, you gave up your music dream? Never touched the violin again? Left everything behind and went abroad alone?" He frowned, and all I did was fail to pull my hand away when she reached for me. "We were on stage. Why have you always been so willful?" Quite a few people around us started looking over. I stopped moving. Old matters from years ago were being brought up again, and the tangled emotions in my heart made me uncomfortable. My knife and fork fell back onto the plate with a crisp sound. I tilted my head and smiled with curved eyes. "Sorry. I really don't understand what you're talking about. When we were young, having a beautiful first love was just a sweet story from the past." I looked puzzled. Why would I be angry? Martin stared fixedly at me. I picked up the bag beside me and said lightly, "You have your dreams, and I can choose the path I want to take too. There's no need to bring up what happened before anymore." My gaze swept over the music stage to the side, and I said honestly, "Besides, I think this piece sounds pretty awful." The violin music stopped abruptly. Just as I turned to leave, Martin stubbornly grabbed my hand. There was no emotion I could read in his eyes. "So you studied finance, something you were never good at, and resigned yourself to a family-arranged marriage? You're going to marry a man you don't even know just to get back at me?" He shook his head faintly. "Rose, you must be out of your mind." I calmly pulled my hand away and said softly, "What does that have to do with you?" "Martin, from what position are you saying all this to me?" His eyes were dark as ink. His lips parted. In the end, he could not say a word. I smiled. "Just before leaving, I remembered something. Oh, right. I heard you and Luna were both named principal players this year. Congratulations." Chapter 3. My head hurt terribly. I went to a nearby coffee shop and ordered an Americano. While I was waiting, a short-haired woman in a business skirt sat down across from me. Her gaze swept over me casually. Then excitement flashed across her face. "Rose! What a coincidence." The short-haired woman put down her phone and happily reached out her hand to me. "It's been so long. I was your high school classmate." I was a little dazed. The traces of that time, which I had deliberately erased, had already become blurry. "Back then, you and Martin even helped pay for my tuition. I've always wanted to find a chance to thank you both." Seeing that I still did not react much, she waved her hand and smiled. "It's normal that you don't remember me. After all, you two were such dazzling people. You helped so many classmates." Sure enough, people who are perfect for each other fit together in every way. "After all these years, you're still unbelievably beautiful." I fell silent for a moment and lowered my eyes without speaking. The short-haired woman seemed to have opened the floodgates. She began gossiping excitedly. "Speaking of which, you two are way too low-key. After all this time, there still hasn't been any news about you. Back then, there was a pretty interesting bet on the school forum. The whole debate about the red rose versus the untouchable white moonlight was intense. Both sides were fighting back and forth like crazy. She took a sip of coffee, then said indignantly, "It made me so mad. How could Luna compare to you? Could she ever compete with childhood sweethearts like you two? Miss, your Americano is ready." I stood up and suddenly found it a little funny. I remembered this incident. 7 years ago, I had been proud and headstrong, and I had voted for myself under that forum post using my real name. But I had never expected that in the end, the one who fled in disgrace would also be me. I turned back and said apologetically, "I have something urgent to deal with. Sorry, I'll have to leave first." The short-haired woman did not look unhappy at all. She waved at me with smiling eyes. "Rose, when are you going to invite me to your concert? I'll book the whole venue." My steps paused, and I hurriedly pushed open the cafe door, looking at her expectant, certain gaze. I truly did not have the courage to tell her. I had betrayed the dream I once had long ago. I had not touched a violin in 7 years. The nights in a city were always dry and cold. Nothing like London's endless misty rain. Some memories could not be forgotten. They could disturb everything in me with effortless ease. My thoughts drifted far away. Back then, everyone knew that I had 2 great loves in my life. The first was the violin. The second was Martin. There was no special reason. I had known Martin since childhood, and we had both started playing the violin when we were little. We lived in the same neighborhood, and our parents were old family friends. We shared the same natural gift for music, as if we had been born with it. I practiced with him in the music room. We learned to read sheet music together, kept time together, and entered competitions together. We knew everything about each other. Our interests matched, and our personalities complemented each other. I was proud and spoiled. He was gentle and attentive. From childhood to adulthood, we were always together no matter what we did. We went skiing in Northern Europe, got into a top middle school, and rode our bicycles home together. He carried my school bag, handed me milk tea, and tied my shoelaces for me. Family background, looks, talent, we matched in every way. Back then, everyone thought I would become the world's leading violinist. And then, I would marry Martin. But in the summer of our 2nd year of high school, someone completely different from us appeared. Her name was Luna. She was a very ordinary girl. Chapter 4. The first time Martin noticed this deskmate of his was when he casually handed her a cup of milk tea. The shop assistant had made the wrong flavor, and I had always been picky. He shrugged and was about to throw the milk tea into the trash can behind him. "Classmate, could you give it to me?" A timid voice sounded. Luna looked up at him in a very small voice. "On the way home after school, Martin told me about it. She seemed to have low blood sugar, and she didn't have any living expenses either." It was the first time he had shown such emotion towards someone else. Back then, I was young and proud. I thought he was simply soft-hearted. In the special talent class, Luna could only be considered the hardworking type. Her professional course grades had always been at the bottom. She was always dressed in the same blue and white school uniform. The moment she played the piano, she would panic, miss the beat, and then wipe away her tears in that weak, helpless way. She was just an ordinary girl with nothing special about her. But later, Martin mentioned her to me more and more often. He said she was already very outstanding in her own way, and that he admired her. Every time, I would refuse to accept it. "But I'm clearly 100 times better than her." He would stop and say seriously, "Rose, she's different from us. Don't look down on anyone ordinary who works hard." Sometimes during class, laughter would come from the back of the classroom. The classmates all turned around and saw Martin, his face red, hurriedly covering Luna's mouth. She blinked innocently, just as her eyes met mine. Sometimes, when Martin brought things for me, he would start bringing an extra one for her too. Our practice room began to let her in to rehearse. He never refused her. Many people began joking that Luna was the untouchable white moonlight, while I was the red rose. One was pure and simple, the other was proud and dazzling. The rivalry between the white moonlight and the red rose lasted 3 whole years, and that name followed me like a shadow, clinging to me every moment like a ghost. As long as Martin and I were there, no matter when or where, we would be compared. But with that spoiled rich girl temper of hers, Luna is so much better. It's only natural for guys to favor the gentle type. Luna really is pitiful. Rose is way too competitive. Though I guess she's a little prettier than Luna. Luna. I began to grow irritable. I threw tantrums. I found it unbelievable. Have you really fallen for her? Every time. He would helplessly flick my forehead. Don't talk nonsense. It's not good for her. At the school anniversary gala, Martin agreed to accompany her on the piano. The two of them performed in perfect harmony and won rounds of applause. Luna was nervous for a moment, and when they took their bow, she tightly held the hand of the person beside her, under the blush of joy on her face. Even someone as usually unremarkable as her looked somewhat pretty, and Martin hesitated for a moment, but did not pull his hand away. The photo was posted online, a white shirt and a white dress. It went viral, gaining millions of views. With red eyes, I threw away all of his white shirts. The two of us were in a cold war for a very long time because of that. From then on, whenever I saw white clothes, I felt like throwing up. Chapter 5. From somewhere, the lingering sound of a violin drifted over again. Yes, the rhythm had to be slow, the melody rising and falling. I sat in the examination room. My left hand pressed the strings, and my right hand lifted lightly. It was an early selection exam, and the examiners were all people I knew well. But the piece I drew was a Norwegian dance. Outside the window, Martin quietly let out a breath of relief. This piece was also our love song. It had played during the summer when we were 17. It was a melody I knew by heart. My lips were pale. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, then began to draw the bow across the strings. The sound of the violin rang clear. That disgusting scene gradually became vivid before my eyes. The place where my fingers pressed down now was where their hands had once intertwined. In this section, he had patiently kept time for her. My violin strings had once been brushed by Luna's hair. How could he? How could he? Why did it have to be this piece? Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I played faster and faster, faster and faster. The string snapped and cut my fingertip. I opened my eyes and calmly stood up. Facing the astonished examiners, I bowed, then left the examination room. Big sister, could you give me some money? My memories were pulled back to the present. On the street, a little boy was holding an old, battered violin as he asked me timidly. I crouched down. Were you the one playing that piece just now? Yeah, I only know one piece. He looked a little dejected. My mom smashed my violin. I want to save money to get it fixed. I saw you standing here listening for a long time, so you must like the violin too. Could you give me just a little money? I had just returned from abroad, and for the moment, I did not have any cash on me. A long, slender hand reached over from the side, handing over several hundred in bills. Here, kid, go get the violin fixed and practice properly. A cool, distant voice. It was Martin again. He patted the boy on the head, then glanced at me from the corner of his eye. With a teasing tone, he said, "He has ambition better than someone I know." I stood up indifferently and left. Martin quietly followed beside me. The moonlight shifted between deep and pale shades. After a long while, he finally said lightly, "Giving up just because of one failure doesn't sound like the Rose I knew. How are you any better than Luna, the person you always looked down on?" My eyes turned icy. I stopped walking. So, what exactly are you trying to say? You got what you wanted. Why are you still coming over to bother me? Martin looked at me deeply, then handed me a ticket. Next week, a very famous investment banker is coming to a city. The city arranged for me to perform. The tickets are almost impossible to get. I hope you'll come too. There are some things I want to say to you. I narrowed my eyes at him. A faint glimmer flashed through his eyes, but soon it settled back into calm. The ticket was edged in platinum, showing how important this performance was. I looked away lightly. Sorry, I won't go. It's nearby. I'll have someone come pick you up. I pulled my collar tighter and did not answer. Martin caught up and naturally took off his coat. Is there a conflict in your schedule? I'll ask if it can be adjusted. I coldly knocked it to the ground. What exactly are you trying to do? He lowered his eyes. 7 years ago, I always regretted. I frowned and cut him off. I told you, I'm already married. I'm doing very well now, and I hope you won't bother me again. He froze for a moment, then suddenly let out a cold laugh. A faint chill colored his voice. Doing well? Are you sure? How long can a loveless business marriage really last? Seeing that I was about to speak, he made a shushing gesture. If you want to argue with me, then let me ask first. Where is your husband? Why isn't he here with you? Is he bald? Or is he gay? Oh, or maybe he's just very rich. The moment he finished speaking, I slapped him across the face. Shut up, I said coldly. Stop forcing your filthy assumptions onto other people. His face turned to the side, yet he laughed softly. Angry? His voice was low. Rose, I've been lonely too. All these years without you. Chapter 6. I felt nothing. His eyes were dark as ink. He stared fixedly at me. The sea breeze blew gently. Only then did I seem to remember that I had once said those words. The one who could not live without him had been me. The one most afraid of loneliness had also been me. But in the end, the one he abandoned was me too. No matter what. You're back. I'm very happy. I won't let the regret from 7 years ago happen again. After saying that, he turned and left without looking back. The hospital was only a few steps ahead. This road had few streetlights and barely any people. He had followed me for a long time. I paused, then walked away expressionlessly. When I was waiting for the elevator on the first floor, I ran into Luna. She was still dressed in that clean, elegant style, though now she had gained a little more gentleness and grace. Now, she was already a famous pianist. Quite a few people had seen her posters, and they quietly gathered around her. She was helping an old lady down the stairs. The old lady, her face glowing with pride, introduced her to everyone around them. This is my granddaughter. She performed Return to Joy with Mr. Martin in Los Angeles. Someone in the crowd asked excitedly, are the rumors about MS Guan and Mr. Martin true? A mutual crush since high school, walking side by side and keeping each other company for years? Luna pressed her lips together and smiled, just about to speak. Then she turned and saw me. The moment our eyes met, she clearly became flustered. Her whole body turned uneasy, and her gaze began to dodge mine. Someone followed her line of sight and noticed me. Wow, who is that? She's so beautiful. Is she some celebrity? Right? Look, even that simple hat she's wearing is Chanel's latest style this year. I ignored them indifferently. Luna bit her lower lip tightly. It was as if we had returned to 7 years ago, when she had lowered her eyes obediently and walked past Martin and me in silent gloom. Sorry, we have to go now. The crowd dispersed in boredom. A flash of grievance appeared in Luna's eyes, and she looked back at me unwillingly. Unwilling? I shook my head. In truth, she had no need to look envious. After all, back then, the one who had fallen from grace and lost everything was me. When I arrived at the hospital room, Mom happily took my hand, and the two of us talked for a long time. Oh, right. Did you see Martin? Where is he? I nodded and said vaguely. He had something to do, so he left first. She sighed, hesitant. Our families have always been close. Martin often comes to visit us. Every time. He stays in your room for an entire afternoon. The violin you broke. He even went to America to find someone to repair it. Mom began rambling on. I still remember when you had a high fever and said you wanted preserved plum-flavored ice cream. He went through several cities looking for it. I looked up and interrupted her with a smile. Mom, that was so many years ago. I'm already married. Oh, right. You two didn't end up together. She patted her head, then fell asleep mid-sentence. Martin's father, sitting to the side, made a shushing gesture at me. The two of us stepped into the corridor. She only wanted to comfort you. She was afraid you still hadn't let go. I suddenly found it a little self-mocking. That was right. Everyone said the same thing. Everyone thought, how could I possibly be willing to let go of the violin? How could I possibly cut off all contact with him for 7 whole years? My dream had shattered, and I had failed in love. That summer after the college entrance exam, everyone was worried about me. They were afraid I would do something stupid. They were afraid I would slip my wrists. In the end, even Luna came to my door to apologize. She stammered, so frightened she was about to cry. I slammed the door coldly. Get lost. Chapter 7. I put my hands on my hips in dissatisfaction. Dad, why are you overthinking things with Mom too? Don't I call you all the time? I really do like London, and I let go of everything a long time ago. I took his arm and smiled sweetly. Let me tell you a secret. Theodore is coming to a city too. Last time we met, everything was too rushed. He said he would stay a little longer this time. He's also prepared lots of gifts and should arrive in a couple of days. He was surprised. So sudden? Does anyone know about his schedule? Should we prepare properly? No need. After I returned to the apartment, there was a red envelope placed by the door. Inside was that ticket. I stuffed it into the trash can. I collapsed onto the bed. But no matter what, I could not fall asleep. Without thinking, I dialed that familiar number and waited for a while. Only then did I realize that it was the middle of the night in London. I tossed my phone aside. Wrapped in the blanket, I drifted in and out of sleep until morning, while brushing my teeth. I checked my phone. Theodore had not called back. For the next few days, Martin did not come to bother me again, so I finally had some peace. After breakfast, I slowly wandered downstairs to the flower shop. I picked out a few flowers, but when I put them together, they looked strangely mismatched. Theodore was very good at arranging flowers. Every bouquet he gave me had been personally chosen by him. He was clearly a cold and rational investment banker. Yet when it came to small things like this, he had a surprisingly romantic touch. We had married first and fallen in love later. At first, I had not expected to have a perfect husband. I had heard that he had long been in love with someone he could never have. And he was usually busy, so the two of us rarely saw each other. Until one day, Theodore came to give a lecture at the business school, and my professor asked me to hand him a cup of coffee. He stared at me for a very long time, then took it from me unnaturally. I casually mentioned, "Oh, right, I'm going skiing with some friends next week, so I might not be home for a month." The coffee in Theodore's hand instantly spilled onto the floor. After that, for some reason, many more pieces of jewelry and gifts began appearing at home. The vase in the living room started to be filled with all kinds of beautiful bouquets. Even the little dog I raised had a pretty pink bow tied around its neck. My husband from this arranged marriage began wandering around the house every day. Slowly, the two of us came to know each other, and then we fell in love, just like now. As I looked at the bouquets on the stall that were almost sold out, I suddenly missed him so much. Let it spread out at the top and gather at the bottom. Add 2 champagne roses too. A long, slender hand reached over from beside me. 2 champagne roses were gently placed on either side. Elegant yet playful, the vivid colors of the bouquet suddenly seemed to light up. I froze, then stood up and hugged him tightly. Theodore was wearing a white trench coat, and a faint trace of exhaustion showed on his face. His suitcase stood to the side. He bent down and held me even tighter. Rose, I missed you so much. Chapter 8. Weren't you supposed to arrive the day after tomorrow? Theodore had come back early. This time, we had only been apart for 5 days. He had just taken a shower and was drying his hair with a towel. His eyes were dark and deep. Last night, you called me. You have a very regular schedule. You rarely go to bed after 11. And the phone rang for 21 seconds. I found it funny. So? Theodore said very seriously. So I didn't eat properly all day. I booked the earliest flight. He leaned in and kissed me softly, the fresh scent of shampoo surrounding me. I sighed. He had always been attentive. After that, I took Theodore around a city and had a proper few days of fun. I brought him through the alleys I had walked through as a child and took him to eat rice cakes from the old street stalls. On the morning of the 3rd day, Theodore gently helped me fasten my dress. Rose, there's an event in the city I promised to attend before. Will you come with me? I did not think much of it and nodded. When we got out of the car at the venue, someone smiled and led us into the concert hall. This way, please. I pressed my lips together, vaguely sensing that something was wrong, until Martin stepped onto the stage and smiled at me with curved eyes. He took a deep breath, lowered his gaze, and quietly began playing the violin. There were not many people in the venue, but amazement flashed across everyone's faces. Luna had come too. She stood at the side of the stage, secretly staring at him in a daze. The person beside us was still introducing him. This is Mr. Martin, a famous musician in the country. It's not easy to invite him to perform. I lowered my head, my expression indifferent. Beside me, Theodore narrowed his eyes. His smile was cold and thin, but he said nothing. The sound of the violin was as light as flowing water, and the composition was indeed remarkably clever. A hem, right at the climax. A cough, neither loud nor soft, interrupted the sound of the strings. It was like a fishbone stuck in the throat. Impossible to swallow, impossible to spit out. Theodore raised an eyebrow. Martin did not seem to care. He paused, then continued smiling at me. When the piece ended, he bent politely at the waist. He looked at me from afar, a flame flickering in his eyes as he said each word clearly. This piece was composed for the girl in my heart. Today, she is also here. The entire hall erupted in whispers. Martin slowly walked toward me. Today, he had specially worn a black velvet tailcoat, and his hair had been carefully styled. He said softly, "Back then, we missed each other because of regret. This time, I poured all my longing into the music. I only want to ask her if she is still willing to." I frowned. Everyone froze, and envious gazes swept toward me. At the side of the stage, Luna bit her lip tightly. Her bangs fell, covering her eyes. This deeply affectionate confession was interrupted without mercy. "Martin, is this how a city treats its guests?" Theodore lowered his eyes and gave a soft laugh. He casually held my hand and played with my fingers. "Who are you?" Under Martin's frowning gaze, Theodore's eyes grew colder and colder. The teacup beside his hand was flung out. "In front of everyone, you're using a concert hall to confess your love to my wife?" Cold sweat broke out on the person in charge of receiving us. He hurriedly pulled Martin, who had frozen in place, aside. "My goodness, you've always been so reliable. How did you end up making a joke like this?" Mr. Martin must have mistaken her for someone else. "Sir, madam, we're terribly sorry. Terribly sorry." Theodore remained indifferent, showing little reaction. Martin's gaze lowered and fell on our intertwined hands. He murmured, "How could it be him?" His eyes were clearly full of coldness, yet he had no choice but to clench his fists and suppress it. Theodore tapped the armrest unhurriedly. "Martin, you need to apologize." He smiled. "You know, I've lived in London for a long time. What I value most is manners." Martin finally moved his gaze away from me, and he smiled too. "Since when does a London investment banker get to make decisions for my family?" Seeing the atmosphere turn icy, the man nervously patted Martin and whispered a few words into his ear. Martin pressed his lips together and said nothing. Chapter 9. At that moment, Luna hurried up in her thin high heels. She naturally wrapped her arm around his. Sorry. This piece was something Martin wrote for me last night while we were rehearsing. Today was all a misunderstanding." Martin did not move. Luna was delighted, and a gentle look flashed in her eyes. "He stayed up late yesterday, and his head hurt badly this morning. Maybe he mistook me for you." I felt so disgusted that I could not help choking. Cough, cough, cough. Theodore gently patted my back and said lightly, "Is that so? I really can't see which part of Miss Guan resembles my wife. I don't accept that excuse, but I can't be bothered to keep arguing with you. Watch yourselves." He took my hand and led me away. Faintly, I could feel Martin's gaze fixed firmly on my back. It left me utterly baffled. Two lunatics. The person beside me walked faster and faster. I felt a little worried. I had never told him about what happened before. Would he mind? Theodore pressed his lips together and said nothing. When we passed by a musical instrument store, he stopped. Then he turned around and bought a violin. The owner smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "Here's the sheet music. If you need lessons, come find me." Huh? I blinked. "What are you doing?" "Learning the violin." That night, he did not even look at his laptop. Instead, he spent the entire evening studying the sheet music. I watched TV, and he played the violin. I put on a face mask, and he played the violin. When I was about to sleep, he played the violin with an aggrieved look on his face. I took a deep breath and said with a smile, "Then let me teach you." Theodore was pleasantly surprised, but he asked carefully, Forget it. Haven't you not played in a long time? I can learn by myself. I spread my hands. It's actually fine. My husband wants to learn. What else can I do? I'll keep him company, to avoid disturbing others. I went with him to the lakeside in the park. I took a deep breath. When I touched the violin again, the familiar feeling in my body had not faded. It was an intimacy that had existed since childhood. Even with my eyes closed, I knew where every string was. I first tested the sounds simply. Then I asked softly, "Why do you suddenly want to learn the violin?" Theodore turned his head to look at me, his voice muffled. "The first time I met you, you were playing the violin." I froze. Something had happened at home then. My grandfather had passed away, and I hid in a tree by myself. It was also by a lake. You were wearing a long dress, leaning against the railing. Your violin sounded free and proud. You gave me a very beautiful piece of music. I was grateful for it, and I always wanted to find a chance to give one back to you. He paused, his long lashes lowering. Maybe I'm too petty. Today, when I saw someone give you a song, I was so jealous. I almost lost control. The no-nonsense investment banker from the rumors had bright eyes. "So, will you teach me? I'll play it for you, okay?" For a moment, I felt dazed. Then I smiled gently. "Then let's do mariage d'amour. It's a little simpler." I gently held his hand. "Keep your hand straight. Bend your wrist inward. I'll keep time for you." The words were very familiar. I thought I would feel sick. I thought I would feel nauseous. When I was 18, in the practice room, Martin had patiently taught Luna the same way. It seemed the two of them had gotten tired from practicing, and the girl had whined that she wanted to learn the violin. His violin had been sent for tuning, so he casually picked up mine and said with a smile, "Put your hand here. Bend your wrist inward. I'll keep time for you." He had gently wrapped around the girl from behind, correcting her posture. He had used my violin many times before, but this time, it was for the girl in his heart. I crouched outside the door and listened as they began playing. It was the Norwegian dance. But now, when that fragmented memory reappeared once more, those emotions had somehow become distant. The evening wind by the lake lifted the hem of my dress, and the sound of the violin by my ear came in broken notes. "Rose, I've had a crush on you for a very long time." I looked at the person beside me, and a sweet, tingling happiness spread through my heart. Music had always been something very romantic, as long as it happened in a moment when two hearts understood each other. The original piece Martin had given me this morning was already hard for me to remember. But now, this simple mariage d'amour made me so happy I almost wanted to cry. I like it very much. Thank you. Chapter 10. A few days later, the video of Martin confessing through his violin performance was posted online. The piece was tender, and the man was deeply affectionate. With his current success and good looks, netizens who had fallen hard for the romance began searching for the girl in the video. Theodore's mood was icy. He made several calls. There had not been many people there who could secretly record at the time, unless someone had prepared it in advance. The video was taken down almost immediately, but the impact of the online attention was huge. Soon, Luna and I were both dug up. "Which girl is it? She's so lucky." The old labels of the untouchable white moonlight and the red rose were dragged up again. They stuck to me like a piece of gum, making me sick, and Martin's response to the matter was vague and non-committal. When reporters surrounded him, he was wiping his violin. He smiled. "There has only ever been one person from beginning to end, and I love her very much. I won't let go so easily." He paused, lowering his eyes with a gloomy, wounded look. That sparked a second wave of frenzy. "Aw, Martin is so devoted. A campus romance." I knew our first love ship was the ultimate one. I was already married, and this matter was not good for my reputation. Recently, quite a few bored people had even found my address. Not only did they block my door in the middle of the night, but they also stuffed all kinds of cards into my apartment. Without exception, every card had the word forever written on it. Theodore's family had a villa in a city, so I moved there temporarily. Holding back his anger, Theodore arranged to meet Martin. His words were brief. "Clarify it. In return, I'll give priority investment to your family's Jonko project." The person across from him did not seem affected by the rumors at all. He smiled lazily. "What's wrong? Haven't been sleeping well lately, Theodore? Theodore ignored him. I don't care what your purpose is. I only care about getting results quickly. Don't try to provoke me. And if I say no? Theodore's eyes turned cold. So you deliberately led them on. What do you mean, deliberately? Martin chuckled, his gaze fixed on me. The person I've always liked is Rose. We grew up. I really looked down on you. His words were cut off. What did you say? Theodore narrowed his eyes and shook his head. Your so-called love is cheap. You don't care at all what kind of trouble your obsession has caused other people. Martin seemed to be stabbed by those words, and the smile on his face disappeared. He growled. I'm just unwilling to accept it. So what? A business marriage? Do you really think you're that deeply in love? Do you know her better than I do? His smile turned malicious. You should know that for the first 18 years of her life, I was the one by her side. That's why I actually regret ever knowing you. I lowered my head and said lightly. It was the first thing I had said since arriving here. He froze. You had someone record that video in advance, didn't you? The moment I looked into your eyes, I knew. Childhood sweethearts, yet in the end, things had become this ugly. I found it rather unfortunate. Martin, life isn't some fantasy where two women share one man. You already made your choice 7 years ago, yet here you are still putting on this act. His eyes turned deep red. But I don't like Luna. I never liked her at all. Back then, I was just a little interested in her, so I took extra care of her. I slowly sipped my tea without saying a word. Martin seemed genuinely unable to understand. He braced both hands on the table, his eyes full of resentment and grievance. If you hadn't failed that day, you would have gone to the same university with us. We would still be like we were before. Why? Why do you hate me so much? Why do you hate the Norwegian dance so much that you smashed your own violin? I sighed and looked back at him calmly. Because I used to love that piece too much. The Norwegian dance. At first, I also thought it was something that could only be played for one girl. Chapter 11. His entire body froze. His gaze turned a little panicked and lost. You, yeah. The day before the exam, quite unexpectedly, I went back to the practice room. I spread my hands indifferently, and then I saw you using my violin, guiding her hands through that piece. But maybe the two of you were too absorbed to notice me. Martin trembled, his lips pale. I had wiped that violin for a very, very long time, yet I still felt it was dirty. Along with that person, and that piece. They all made me feel unbearably sick. Theodore handed me a glass of water and patted me with concern. I smiled slowly. Then I clasped my hands together and looked at the man in front of me, who now looked utterly defeated. So, for the sake of what we once had, can you let me go? I really don't want any trouble. He stood there without moving. After finishing the last sip of tea, we politely stood up and left. After a long while, Martin let out a series of low laughs, staggered back a few steps, and collapsed into his chair. Then, all of a sudden, he began sobbing so hard he could barely speak. In the car, Theodore drove with one hand, while his other hand held mine with aching tenderness. Even if you hadn't said those things, I could have handled it. I dumped 30% of the shares yesterday. This time, Martin has no choice but to fall into the trap he dug for himself. Either he gets married, or he gets out. That uncle of his from overseas is coming back soon. His beautiful, fox-like eyes narrowed slightly, like a grudge-holding fox. He let out a cold laugh. I bought the land in Jonko a long time ago. I just bid up the price under another name. Investment is still investment, but the Martin family's investment bank is probably going to be unstable for quite some time. Trying to outsmart a businessman. I rested my chin on my hand and looked out the window. But if you do this, how much time will you have to spend filling this hole later? He laughed lowly. Why do you think I worked so hard all these years? Wasn't it so that, when needed, I'd have enough power to crush someone? I just can't stand seeing anyone bully you. Warmth spread through my heart. I leaned forward and kissed the corner of his mouth. Then can you restrain yourself a little tonight? Sure. Tonight, I'll play the violin for you. I just learned a piece yesterday. Huh? Again, the days that followed were calm and peaceful, but outside, the media was in complete chaos. Left with no choice, Martin could only use Luna as his shield. She took the opportunity to pressure him into marriage. Under the furious scolding of Martin's grandfather, Martin agreed to the wedding. The two of them hurriedly held the ceremony. On the big screen, someone even played Martin's viral solo violin piece as proof of their love. But the groom was indifferent, and the bride was uneasy. This incident was basically a public stamp on their devoted love image. From then on, no matter what they truly felt, the two of them would not be able to divorce. At the same time, his family's situation worsened day by day. This time, Theodore was determined to teach them a lesson. He gave no ground at all. Without his family's protection, countless people began eyeing Martin's position as principal player. His status in the concert hall became painfully awkward, neither high nor low. And after Luna married Martin, she had long been forced to give up her position. Whenever there was a concert, Martin disliked the idea of her appearing in public and would not let her perform at all. She could only quietly be a wealthy wife, shouting in anger every day over Martin leaving early, returning late, and treating her with cold indifference. When I was putting on a face mask, Theodore mentioned it casually, smiling a little wickedly. I only wanted to teach them a small lesson at first. Who told them to dig their own grave and buy off the media? How tragic. A whole pile of bitter couples tied to them. I raised an eyebrow and gave no comment. All right, let's stop caring about other people's business. We have to get up early for the flight tomorrow. Chapter 12. While waiting for the flight at the airport, I went to the restroom. Suddenly, someone pressed a knife against my neck. Expressionless, she dragged me outside. Security here was very strict, so I asked cautiously, "Do you want money?" "I have 10,000 in cash in my bag." She smiled self-mockingly. Then she turned those eyes toward me. "Rose, you must be pretty pleased with yourself now, right?" It was Luna. I'm always wondering why heaven is so unfair. Why is it that no matter how hard I try, I still can't compare to you in anything? She held the dagger against my face. "Will you die with me? You're the person I've envied most in my entire life. Come with me." She dragged me to the rooftop and sat with me on the edge, our legs dangling in the air. Not far away, Theodore arrived with a group of police officers. His expression was anxious, and he was shouting something loudly, but I could not hear any of it. "Luna." Luna's hand paused, and her voice carried a sob. "What are you doing here? Don't come any closer." Martin looked deeply at me, then coaxed her gently. "Don't worry. I'm here to help you. We're husband and wife, aren't we? Give her to me. Be good." Her eyes were red. "You really aren't lying to me?" After Martin nodded, she lowered the knife. The moment he took me from her, he pushed me far back. The police rushed forward from the side, and Theodore held me tightly in his arms. Behind us, all that remained was the woman's heart-wrenching cry. "Martin, you lied to me." "Why?" When we left, Martin did not come over again. A little boy ran over, holding a beautiful violin in his arms. In a childish voice, he said, "An uncle asked me to return this to you." The cracks on the violin's body had been repaired so well that its old appearance was almost unrecognizable. I froze. Then I sighed and gently placed it on the seat. I tucked my scarf into place and hurried after Theodore, who was checking in ahead.